Hey everybody, thanks for coming back to the channel. Those of you who have viewed some of our Prusa videos before, well, we've got a new one for you now. Today we're going to upgrade the Prusa i3 MK3S Plus, which we've done a couple of videos on previously, with the the rapid change Revo 6 nozzles from E3D. So if you haven't seen the previous videos with the Prusa, please go to our channel and view those if you need to know more basic information on the Prusa. We've also got an install video with the Raspberry so you can monitor it remotely and all that stuff. So please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and we'll get busy on this project. All right, so we've been using the Prusa. Right now it's October. We've first received it in January, and we've been pumping out a lot of our store items on hotfabs.com and some items that are prototypes that we have not advertised yet. We have decided that we need to quick change some nozzles because some of our items that are printed with more detail, like these little charms here, need the 0.4 nozzle, and the larger items like these we can get away with printing with a 0.6 nozzle. So it's kind of a pain to swap the nozzles out on these, as you probably know. That's why you're here, because you have to use a socket and something to hold the hot end with. It's just a pain, and then you have to remember which nozzle you've got in there for the next time you change over to another project. Those of you familiar with the channel, you know that we do use Amazon a lot for some of the links and everything down below. Right now, the Revo nozzle kit or hot end kit is not available on Amazon yet. That could change. If it does, I'll put the link down below in the description. But for now, I'm going to put the link down below in the description for a couple different places you can buy it directly from E3D or Matter Hackers. And we got ours from Matter Hackers, and this is the full service kit. It comes with a 0.25, 0.4, 0.6, and a 0.8 nozzle. And the benefit of these hot ends are, number one, that they're interchange. They quick change, so you can turn and the nozzle comes out. Also, it's a lot easier to identify them. As you can see here, they have these little rubber boots on the end that can pop off. But let's see if we can get a zoom in on this. It is engraved with, let's see if I can get it to focus. I had it focused there for a second, but it's 0.8. It's focusing on my project down there. Anyway, they're engraved, and then once you put the boot over it, the little rubber sock, I guess is what they call it, then it cleans up the look a lot better like this. So you always know what you have. And it came with these rubber socks or boots or whatever you want to call it installed on the nozzles, but you can change them out to whatever color you want. The kit also comes, of course, with a built-in fan and the hot end and the wiring and the Bowden tube. So that's what the kit comes with. All right, so something important to note is that the kits are hardware specific. So you know, we're doing a video on the Prusa i3 MK3S Plus. We've got some other printers too, like the Crealities, but we are upgrading the Prusa, and it does have 24 volts. So we ordered one with the 24 volt option, and that is specific to the M3KS. So this is Matter Hackers website. Now also, one thing they came out with was they have this obsidian nozzle, which is now, it's a wear resistant nozzle. Now it's not available yet, but you can pre-order them. So that's something to consider. They don't have the nozzles out yet for the more abrasive materials like glow in the dark and some others. that you might be wanting to print with. But for now, since we only print with PLA and ASA and TPU, this will work great. All right, so I'm going to assume that you still have filament in your Prusa in the hot end, as we do. So we're going to go ahead and preheat it so that we can unload it. And then also we're going to move the hot end up. So we just go down here to move axis, and then see, I'll crank it up there right about just above the middle is what I would do. And then we're going to move it over. Into the center to make it easier to work on. We're going to click unload filament, and she spits it out. And there. Now for this mod, since we're swapping out the entire hot end, we're not going to bother taking the nozzle off because we're going to have the nozzle on the Revo. And so what we do have to do though is turn the Prusa off and disconnect the power. All right, so we're not going to be needing the small fans. We're just going to remove it, just unclips like so. And then you're also going to need a 2.5 millimeter hex key and a screwdriver, Phillips head. So we're assuming that you've waited a while for the hot end to cool off. Now we're just going to remove these two Allen head screws or bolts right here from your fan assembly with your 2.5 hex key wrench. And place your fan up here between the two belts carefully so that it is out of the way. Next, we can remove the two forward bolts from the heatsink fan. Note that one of the bolts is actually longer, and so you'll have to make sure that you put it in the right place, and that would be the bottom one. Remove the face of the extruder. Next, you're going to remove the two bolts on the face of the extruder. Just wanted to get a better angle here on the bolts that you're removing on the extruder here, extruder body. Kind of see it's in there. A little awkward to get to. All right, so once you've got them loosened up, slowly and carefully just work it off of there. It can be a little bit tricky to get out, but you're just going to have to work these bolts out until they give up the hold, and you can see that the body comes off like this. And now we've got our original hot end and extruder exposed. One thing I noticed is that this is a good time if you've had your Prusa for a little while, it gets pretty dirty. So now's a good time to get it cleaned up while you're doing the upgrade. Next, you're going to remove on the back of the Prusa, you're going to remove these two top screws here and here. Once you get the screws loosened, we want to make sure that you support the motor while you finish removing them all the way. All right, so now we've got the screws pulled out almost all the way, and you can see the gap where the motor is from the extruder. So now we're going to carefully pull the motor forward a little bit, and we'll be able to get the hot end out. Drop it down. and then slightly shove the motor back a little bit more secure until we are ready to put it in all the way. So here's a close-up look. You can see how dirty it is in there behind the fan. Next, we're just going to cut those zip ties that hold everything up. Careful when you snip these zip ties that you do not cut the wiring. It's best if you can cut it near a printed plastic part. There we go. And not cut near the wires. Then we'll loosen the wires up from the zip ties. Now we're going to remove the PTFE tube from the heat sink and the thermistor. Push down on this black collar here and slide the tubing out. There we go. You can see it's beveled on the end there. Make a note of that. So what you're going to find is with the MK3S Plus is that the tubing doesn't go in as far, so we're going to have to make a cut. And so we're going to take our micrometer, and you can see I have it set to 10 here. We're going to measure and mark at 10 millimeters where we have to cut it. Okay, so then they give you an extra piece in case you mess it up, but if the original one is in good condition, you can use it. All right, so we've got the mark here to make it so that the tube is the right size. And if you have a tubing cutter, that's great. I can't find mine at the moment, but we have an X-Acto knife, which is very sharp, and I can make a pretty straight, good cut using this. Try to avoid squashing the tubing. And then one thing you need to note is that the original tubing has this chamfered area, or I guess kind of a hollowed out angular area, so that the filament can guide into it easily. So we're going to have to trim that out. And they do say that you can use a drill bit, but I've got this really sharp X-Acto knife that I can trim out neatly, hopefully. And we do have the spare tubing, so we can work with that if we have to fix them. All right, so one thing, you absolutely cannot be any shavings or rough areas on the tubing, okay? And that's probably, I'm gonna say it's probably the hardest part of this upgrade, is getting it exact. But we've checked it and it's clean, and the X-Acto knife worked. We just had to be really careful with it. All right, so now we're gonna dial this thing back to 10 millimeters again. Roughly. Close enough for me. And then we're going to check that we have 10 millimeters from the unit to the top of the tube, and that's as good as it's going to get with my human hands. So we're going to go with that, and then we're going to put the collar back on here. To lock the tubing in place. If I get my thumb underneath there. There we go. There. All right, now it's secure. All right, remember when I was talking about all that residue from the filament, all the strings? This is a good opportunity to go in there with some Q-tips and maybe a little tiny bit of alcohol in the end and clean this mess out. So if you're going to do an upgrade, you might as well do a little bit of cleaning. And you can kind of see on those fan blades, they're pretty dusty as well. So just to clean everything up. We're ready to put our new REVO hot end into the unit. Okay, so we're putting the new hot end in there. And what we want to make sure is that the tubing does not hit. Let's see if I can turn this thing around. It's kind of cumbersome and I don't have much space here. It doesn't hit the gears. Okay, so put the hot end up there. And just make sure it's not going to hit. And you look in from the other side too. Here in a second I'll change the camera angle so we can see. But there's another gear in there. You can kind of, I don't know if you can quite see it, but you just don't want the tube up against this gear. Okay, so we've got the REVO in there, and we've got the wires here for the motor through this little slot. We've pushed it up against the rest of the body. Okay, so it's there. It's solid. Okay, so now we're ready to retighten the motor screws here on the back and the top. We're basically just doing the reverse of what we did earlier, and we're going to reposition the cover here on the front. These really long screws. And if there's detail that I left out or you have questions, please go to E3D's website. They have also done videos on the install on this thing, so I just wanted a little different angle. Their video to me was a great video, but it didn't really show up close detail. Now we're going to put the fan shroud back into place, like that. And we'll grab the screws that came out of that. Okay, now we're just going to put the screws back into the fan, forward part of the fan that holds the bottom shroud on. One on the bottom is longer than the one on the top because it has to go through the shroud, so just make a note of that. And these screws are the same size. All right, we're to the part where you probably were worried, but this is just the wiring part, and actually I think it's going to be easier than the rest of it. So there's a screw right over here on this side that we're going to use to loosen up this door. And once you're open there, we'll pop it open. You can see all the fun that goes on inside the brain here. We're also going to remove these two bolts on the top of the wiring clamp. And another thing I want to mention is, if you haven't seen my channel and the other videos, I do cover the installation of the Raspberry Pi module and software, so be sure to check out the channel and subscribe. And that mod is a fun one as well. Also, we have the camera mod video. All right, so identifying the wires, the thermistor, if I can hold this thing still, the thermistor is this one right here. It is 1, 2, 3 over on the top, and the heater wires is this big one right here. Okay, it's kind of crammed quarters in here, but I'm going to show you. I already pulled out the heater wire plug, and see if I can get an angle here where you can see it. So I'm going to push it back in. You can see where it's at there. And grasping it with your 2 fingers, you can actually pull it straight out like so, okay? You don't need a screwdriver to do that. I was just using that to show you where it's located. And then your thermistor wire is up here, and there's a tiny little tab on the top that you can push down on. Hopefully you can see that. And then it should pull straight out. We'll just wiggle it a little bit like that. Here we go. All right, so there's a couple zip ties you're going to take care of. One is up here, and I've already clipped it to get it out of the way. And the other one is right down here. So carefully clip those so that you're not cutting the wires, and then that'll free your thermistor and your heater wire up so you can remove it from the rest of the assembly. All right, and that's what the V6 hot end looks like, removed with all its thermistor wire and its heater wire gone. Now we're going to find the extensions that came in the kit. Got those right here. And these will allow us to wire from the circuit board up to the loose wires here off the new REVO hot end. I'm going to mention that on the website they mentioned that this wire has recently changed to blue. In this case, I've got a kit where the thermistor is white wire and my heater is the white and red wire. So the extension for the heater is this black wire. That's going to go to the red and white. And then the thermistor extension wire is actually striped blue on white. So that's how that looks, and I'll show you on the website. Okay, so right here, and this is where you're going to get the most up-to-date information, is on the E3D website. Okay, so if something's not looking right, go to their website and check it out and see if they've changed anything with the kit, you know, because there's some new nozzles coming out and everything. So the date of this video may not be the exact kit that you have, but right now it is. So here's another view of how they show that. Okay, so let's plug in our thermistor extension wire, which is the white and blue, into the thermistor wire here. You can see the little clip on the top. And then we're going to take our heater extension wire, plug it in. Same thing, there's a clip on the top, just like that. So now we're just going to route the new wires into the cable housing here. Just kind of stuff them up in there, and we'll zip tie everything when we're done. We removed I think like 4 or 5 zip ties, so we'll get back to that, but just kind of run it along there, make sure it's stuffed in there nice and clean. So at this point you can see that we've got quite the jumbled mess of wires back here, so we're just going to finish up by plugging in the heater wires into the existing plug here. I've got the old one right here. So we're going to loosen up these 2 little flathead screws and pull the leads out and put these 2 leads in their place. So one comment about tools, if you've watched some of my other mod videos, you're going to find out you're going to need a few tools in your collection. And so, you know, you can see here we've used some Allen key wrenches, some flat blade, and Phillips head. screwdrivers. There's a lot of things that you're gonna probably find useful, and I'll put some of those links down in the description to help give you some ideas. If you've been doing 3D printing for a while, you've got a lot of these already. So anyway, look for the links down below. Nice and snug so that if you ever have to pull it back out, you don't pull the wires out. I wanted to get you a little bit closer view of the heater plug receptacle there. You see it right there at the end of the screwdriver. And then also to show you the thermistor plug right there, third one over. It's very difficult for me to get the filming angle on this, such a small area, but as you can see, I've got some forceps or tweezers, large tweezers here to show you where the plug is going to go back in. It's hard for me to keep my fingers out of the way so you can see, but we've got it there. Now we're just going to press it in until it clips. That's the heater plug. We're going to plug the thermistor wire back in. You can see on the wire here, one side's blue striped and the other one's white, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which way you plug it in. There's no polarity on there, just like the heater wire. So doesn't matter which way it goes. It doesn't clip either. This extension wire that they give you does not clip. So there it is, installed. Okay, so everything's plugged in, and we're just going to clean up this wiring here and basically put the clip back here on the neck. I'll show you once I've got it all sorted out. I do apologize today. My allergies are really bad, so I'm sniffing here once in a while. Apologize for that. So we've got all the wires tucked up in there, and now we just have to close the latch or the lid on the circuit board box, and then just tighten this screw up here to close it completely. Then we're going to reinstall the cable ties that hold the wires on the heater and thermistor. I'll have links for some of these down in the description below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See what other Prusa and actually we have Creality 3D printer videos as well. Some of the mods we have for those on there. And then we'll just clip these excess pieces off here. So now we're just going to plug everything back in, put the power cord back into the rear of the power supply. And if you turned the switch off, turn it back on, or you can wait. Mine's actually on a wireless plug back here, so I have control over it with a smart app on my phone, and that way if I'm monitoring it remotely through the Octo app or Octoprint app, or it used to be called Spaghetti Detective, now it's called the Owl. You can see it on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, but anyway, I'm able to remotely view using the camera that I have installed, and there's a video on that on my channel if you check it out, and turn it off or on if I see something going horribly wrong. But anyway, we'll finish plugging things back in. Okay, so we got everything all plugged back in, and now we just have to do a PID tune. So as you can see, the nozzles are all color coded, like I said. And to quick change, you just simply grasp the bottom and unscrew them. And you can quickly and easily swap them out. Now we're ready to do the PID calibration. Scroll down to calibration, select, find PID calibration and select. Now for this, you want to decide what do you commonly print at as far as your temperature goes. Usually, if you're printing PLA, it's going to be around 210. If you're printing ASA, ABS, or something like that, it's going to be up a little bit higher. So they recommend between, if you're printing 50% higher temperature prints, you know, between 200 and 280, to select like 240. But in my case, I print mostly PLA, so I'm going to go ahead and select the 210 as my PID calibration. That's standard. Hit select, and it starts doing its thing. So the cooling fan came on. It's going to start heating up. So to avoid any problems like the hot end crashing into, or the nozzle crashing into the bed, we're going to go ahead and recalibrate Z. So I'm going to go ahead and load some PLA here. We've already preheated, and select auto load. Notice I've got a little bit of a bevel on the filament, because it's the first time we're loading this since we put in the new tube and hot end. So we want to make sure that it's going to load. So if we have any gap in there at all, the filament can get hung up on the channel and where the tube goes in. All right, so it's extruding. That's a great sign. So the last nozzle that I had in this before I did the upgrade was a 0.6, and right now I've got a 0.4 in because that's where most of you print with. I don't know. Depends on your preferences and how big of items you're printing. But if you go into settings here, you can change which nozzle you have. See there, it shows 0.6, but now we got a 0.4 in there. So we'll scroll through there. There's the 0.4. Also, if you've changed your bed, make sure you have it selected properly. And ours is just on the smooth one. All right, so now we're going to do a first layer calibration. So I'm going to scroll down to calibration, first layer calibration, then start from 0. I'm going to select PLA, and it'll start heating. It's already there. It's going to do a mesh bed leveling calibration. Okay. Got some squiggles there. We're going to have to make some adjustments. Yep, so it's too high, as you can see. So starting from 0, ended up with the nozzle too high. So down here on the left of my rudimentary silencing pad here, I had written PLA minus 1.25 and TPU looks like a minus 1.35. So that means that our nozzle starting from 0 is too high. So let's go back and adjust it in real time while it's moving. And the whole reason for this, redoing this, is just to make sure that your mod doesn't create a situation where your nozzle hits the bed. Now, my understanding is that you probably don't need to do this because the specifications of the Revo nozzle and hot end are so exact. It's almost, almost exactly the same as the V6 original. They probably don't need to do this, but as cautionary thing, you want to do this calibration manually. Now it's going to do that first little blob like it did before, and it's still too high, as you can see. So we're going to adjust Z down to the negative and watch while I dial it down. Still too high. You can see it's spitting out filament in the air. Way too high. We're going to dial it all the way down here. Takes a long time because it's really high. But if you watch it carefully, you won't crash into the bed. Dialing it down. Okay, I'm at 1.01. Let's see what it looks like there. Still high. So I said 1.25. Alright, now it's coming down. We're at 1.175. Let's take a look at that. There's 1.21. Let's see what the result is, just to be conservative. We don't want to be too low, end up scraping the bed. Okay, so we got this thing dialed down to 1.21, and let's take a look at the results. You can see there's not enough squish there, right? So we got to come down even farther and zoom out a little bit. You can see when we started off, it was really squiggly, and they got a little bit flatter. There's no adhesion there, and it took quite a while to get actual adhesion, but this is still not acceptable. So the machine remembers the last one that we did, and so we're going to go ahead and start with that Z offset that I left off with. Select PLA again. Sorry. And she's got to heat up. Now my guess is, so that was where I started with 0 offset, and this is where we ended up with 1.25. Pretty good adhesion, but there's still some separation and gaps in there. That's at minus 1.21, and so now I've got it set up to start out at 1.21. We're going to dial it down to minus 1.25. So this is going to tell us if the Revo was exactly the same, or required exactly the same Z offset as the original V6 did. Okay, so there's the initial purge. And this is at 1.21. I'm sorry, minus 1.21, which looks pretty decent, but from my angle with my eyes, I can see It's a little bit high, not quite enough squish. So we're going to dial her down to minus 1.25. We're going to go ahead and go for it. Oops, there we go. So that's it. We're going to leave it there. We're going to see what the final look is. So it's always scary doing mods because sometimes things get really screwed up. We had a perfectly good machine that you shouldn't have modified and it was printing great. But with the volume of printing that I do and the need to change between different models that I print, I need these REVO quick change nozzles. So when I get an order for something that requires a small, finer detailed thing, I need to get that nozzle in there, and it's a pain. And also you do a lot of damage. Every time you change nozzles on the V6, you're opening up your possibilities for damage on that hot end, loosening the wires, etc. So this quick change option is a great thing. Okay, it is done. Let's zoom in here. I don't see any gaps between the rows. We'll peel it off of there and take a closer look. So looking at this very carefully, you can see it's holding together well. Apologize for my ugly fingernails. I do a lot of mechanic work too. Stuff outside. Check out my channel and you'll see we do a lot more than 3D printing, but this is looking pretty good. It's got good adhesion. I can still break it apart, but I like how flat it was, and there were no gaps before I started breaking it apart. So we could even give it a little bit more squish, but I'm going to leave it there and do some test prints, and we'll go from that. So now I'm going to do a nozzle swap and go to the 0.6 nozzle, which I have one of my products that I sell print with on a 0.6 nozzle. So first we're going to go in here into settings and change the nozzle diameter to 0.6. Oh. There we go. Now we just have to wait for the nozzle to cool down. You still have to wait for the stuff to cool down. And we've also unloaded the filament. It's cooled down enough now. Preheat, PLA. Got the new one in there. And you can also select auto load, and that'll give you the same thing as far as the steps that go to loading the filament rather than preheating, but I'm so used to preheating that that's just what I do. So here is the Octoprint interface, and it comes with all sorts of different options, plugins, control. If you haven't done this, I encourage you to look at the video that we've done on how to install this, and the camera and the Raspberry Pi controller. So we're just going to do a real quick 20-minute print on this and see how it turns out with that different nozzle in there. You can see we've got the target here set for this print. This dashboard plugin is really nice. This is a really tiny print. It's just a cap. Here's a view of the what used to be called the Spaghetti Detective. Now it's called Obico, and this allows you to monitor for failures during your print remotely. So if you're not at home, you can pop on there and it'll notify you. You can buy more time for failure detection, but it comes with a certain amount to begin with. But this is really nice if you're gone a lot, you're printing a big job, so it'll notify you immediately and you can shut the printer off or discontinue the print or pause the print. In order to use that feature, of course, you have to have the Raspberry Pi hooked up, and we can show you how to do that on the other video if you search for it. Progress is coming along pretty well. We don't have any failures. Right, the print is done and it turned out perfectly. That's with a 0.6 nozzle. Got a little bit of elephant's foot at the bottom. That's due to my slicer settings. I've been seeing that lately, even before the nozzle change. So I need to do a compensation on that with my slicer. But anyway, yeah, this looks perfect. It's strong, it's tight, and really looks great. So there we are. I'm very pleased with the upgrade. Click on the links below and support the channel by subscribing. Check out the other videos for mods on the Prusa and the Creality. Thanks for watching.